All right, so some of you have been asking for a little more like drawing-based instruction. So how might I take something a little more complex and translate that into something drawing-based when we haven't been addressing drawing as a ceramics class, perhaps in the same degree. So I have an example of my piece here. If you have it in front of you, like the real life thing, that's awesome. I just have it here so that you can kind of see where I'm going from here. And some of the first things that I want to think about are like, what are the main shapes? So really don't focus on all the little details right now. What is the general shape of this? And I sometimes will even outline this because it helps me visualize it. So maybe just like a, Sharpie or some marker. Just getting the general outline helps me see kind of where I need to go with this. So this is where maybe having a picture could be useful. And I also have to decide, am I drawing this entire thing, or maybe I want to just do like a section of it, right? So if I wanted to do a section of it, that also might need to be decided at some point in the near future. So maybe I just want to draw it from here and leave out this lower part, right? So I figured out my main shapes, and so from here I can repeat those. And some people will hold their pencils like this. If you're drawing and you want to draw really loosely, actually holding it like this gives you a wider kind of like loose drawing skill. And remember, we did some drawing warm-ups with like ellipses. So if you feel like you're really having a hard time getting going, you might want to do some warm-ups first. So go with what's comfortable, but don't feel afraid to switch it up. So for this one, I also might want to think about like what angles do I have, because it's a fairly linear piece. So what, this is not straight up and down. It has a slight tilt to it in each one. So I could even kind of identify the angles of each piece and go from there. So if this piece is like at a slight angle, I could just draw that angle here. Maybe this one's at a slight angle here. And I have this other one going on here. So from here, I've got my slightly angled lines, and then I can build from there. And it kind of curves in a little bit. The nice thing if I have a picture is that I can really mirror, okay, my end point is here and my end point is here, right? So you can really start to visualize and compare as you're going, right? But I'm not going to worry too much about it, right? I'm just getting the general shape down and the general angles. Sometimes if I have this like segment here, I might want to think about what is the cross angle and help myself visualize that. Helps me see where to curve in, right? So it curves in at this cross angle, and it also helps me see where it curves back out. This almost tilts up a little bit more than I've drawn it, so maybe it starts to tilt up at that cross point. So drawing in any sort of accuracy is about really paying attention to angles. And at one point I was paying attention to the angle up right here, but I was not paying attention to the correlation of height, right? So I got the height and size here correct, but I was totally off with this piece. I overestimated its overall size, right? So I need to go back and erase this top part and know that I'm really just ending right here. So I got a little ahead of myself. Right? And then I said I wanted to maybe end it at one point. I think I want to end it a little further down because I like this angle here. So I'm going to end it here and just pretend that that part doesn't exist. So maybe I want to give it a pot so we can pretend, remember we have those ellipses. So this is really why I like to draw in pencil, because I can go back and erase all of these lines, right? So this is what you would call your under sketch, right? So I can come back in and erase it, and then I can go in with whatever material I want to use later. So this is like my general shape. Again, it's not done. I don't have all my details, but I can really see the piece start to make sense as a object and not just get overwhelmed with all of the details. So from here now I can really think about details, yeah? So then that's where I would really take it in a similar vein, right? So what are the angles of the individual spines and ridges, right? What shape do they possess? And also, how realistic am I going, right? So I could leave it pretty much like this and it would convey the same general look that I'm going for, right? Or I can get a little bit more detailed. So for instance, on this one, I can see that at this point here, that's where that ridge is. I'm going to assume that it goes further down just because I don't see that here. And you kind of have to decide, what are you focusing on? Are you focusing on the channels, the grooves, or the high points? Choose one so that you're not kind of confusing yourself with one or the other. So these ones really, these edge ones really are defined right here. And so then I can go back and say, well, I know I'm going to have this channel if I want to really get into detail in terms of shape and form, right? Then I would have to start identifying shadows, and I could do that with some gentle shading, or I might come back in with a marker at one point and do that, right? But the main idea with drawing is that I'm taking it from its basic shape and basic angles and relationship of like start points and end points and size relationships, and moving that onto my paper, knowing that I might get it wrong first, and I can go back and adjust, and I can come and erase this. So then from here, what I would do is I'd continue to add in some of these details, again, to whatever degree I wanted. You kind of want to identify, like, what are the really key things to this picture or this image or this object that I'm drawing? Like, what do I have to include? So for example, for this cactus, I needed to have these shapes, and I probably want a few more of these ridges. These ones don't really have spines, but they have these individual little like nodules, right? Do I need to include that? Does that add anything to my piece, or does it really, not matter? I think I'm going to really want to focus on these lines because that tends to be the really defining characteristic here. So it's almost these indented lines that stand out the most. So I'm going to gently draw it, knowing that I'm going to come back in and shade it in some way. So I might just use some kind of like hatch work. So I might just do cross hatching, is where you're overlapping in multiple directions, but you could also just hatch it in one direction like that, and it will show kind of a shadow, right? Or of course I can come back in and go the other direction as well. And where is the shadow leaning, right? So it's really, the sun is clearly shining this way, so there's no shadows here. There are shadows on the other side. Even though I don't see these ridges, I can see the shadow. So if I know that this is my spine, and actually I can see here, this one kind of comes back out. So like I said before, drawing is all about looking critically, paying attention. All right, and now I'm starting to get into the nitty-gritty of detail, so I'm going to start losing sort of the simplicity, and I might actually like the simplicity of it. So you kind of have to take a step back and look at your piece and say, like, is it good where it is? Like, how realistic am I going for? If I wanted to continue with realism, like I was saying, this sun is shining right here, so it's not hitting over here, so I have my shadows, so I would do a lot more shading on this kind of area, right? But again, there's still these kind of highlights here. If I really want to get detailed, then I have to start identifying almost these lobes, right? These individual curves that are happening here, right? You're gonna look at your object a heck of a lot more closely than you think you were going to or need to if you want to achieve something on the more realistic scale, right? You have to really know what it looks like in order to convey that visually.